Anger is volatile. Anger is crazy. The idea of wrath and anger is this thing that's being sinful. It's something that we got to talk about. It's something we're going to address. And it's difficult to address because there's a line. There's a bit of a blurred line there. It gets the same thing when we talked about gluttony, right? We talked about gluttony being one of the only sins that is based in an actual human necessity. Because gluttony requires food, for the most part, and food is something that is required to live. So it's hard to find that line. In the same way, wrath is interesting because wrath is based, for the most part, on something that is in some level beyond our control. We'll get there in a second. We've been quoting St. Thomas Aquinas a lot, and I don't normally go to like really old school theologians for things, but man, that guy just has a grasp on wording things and talking about the sins, and this is what he said. He declared, anger is the name of passion, a passion of the sensitive appetite. It is good insofar as it is regulated by reason, whereas it is evil if it has set the order of reason aside. So it's talking about this correlation between anger and passion, and it's a good thing if it's regulated by reason. So it's actually okay to be angry sometimes, but as soon as reason goes out the window and you go full Hulk mode, as soon as reason goes out the window, that is when it becomes sinful. The word wrath in our normal English dictionary would say, just simply means intense anger, right? Intense or extreme anger. So wrath would be the most highest. So, right, he hid his pipe for fear of incurring his father's wrath. Like, right, you're hiding something because you don't want to get caught in that directed anger, right? So again, wrath implies also some level of direction towards it. You can't be wrathful at everything. You have wrath in a direction. When we talk about things in the Bible, you hear about the wrath of God, there's always direction implied, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But as I said before, wrath is based partially on something that is beyond our control. And what do we mean by that? It means this. The truth is we are going to get angry at things. There are things that are going to happen that are going to be outside of our control. We live in a fallen world. And as a result, often things don't go our way. We could stub our toe, our belt loop gets stuck in a door handle. That happened to me this week. I was like, my daughter was being really rude, and I gave her time out. She's almost 5, and I had to close the door, but my belt loop got stuck, and I got pulled back in, and I kind of got mad at the belt loop, and I closed the door angry, and she was like, oh, what did I do? I'm like, oh, no, I wasn't mad at you, but I'm still kind of mad at you because you're being disciplined right now. But it happens, right? Or maybe the internet goes down. I've been on this roller coaster with Shaw. My internet's been going up and down, and it's making me so angry. I'll even be at work, and Christy will text me. She'll be like, "Internet's down again." I'm like, "Great! I'm gonna punch Roger in the face." Rogers is now with Shaw, so me and Roger, we're gonna beef. That's not true. That was a bad example of anger. Or maybe you don't have cell phone service, or your screen gets cracked, it falls out of your pocket, or you're stuck in traffic. I moved here from the Toronto area. The 401 is the busiest highway in the world. It's got 18 lanes, and they're going nowhere, and it's awful. I hate traffic. You can say that you hate things that are evil. I don't hate the people in traffic, but I hate traffic. That can get me angry. Maybe it's justified. And sure, these are all fun, light examples, but the truth is sometimes our anger comes in ways that are actually more serious. Sometimes we're mistreated. Sometimes we are hurt, or people we love are hurt. Sometimes we're damaged. People sin against us, against our values, and we are angry, and that's actually okay. It's actually okay to be angry sometimes. And as much as it is a virtue to have self-control, and we've talked about controlling our feelings and not having your feelings control you, sometimes we can't help it, and we just get angry. Sometimes something just triggers you and you just get mad. Did you know that that's not actually a sin? It is not a sin to be angry. Sometimes anger is justified. God himself has been angry. There's things that make God very angry. And if we're trying to be like God, if we're trying to model ourselves after Christ, because Jesus got angry, there are things that should also make us angry. There's actually quite a lot of things that should make us angry. Anything that makes God angry should also make us angry. Anger in itself is not a sin, but when does it cross the line towards wrath? When does it cross the line to be something that is sinful? Really quick, I see Jan is here. Are you here to look at the door? Oh, you already did? Okay. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't waiting. So, hey, Jan, how you doing? Everyone say thank you to Jan. She works at Horizon. She let us stay here wonderfully. So thanks, Jan. There we go. So why is wrath considered a sin if sometimes anger is just and anger is good? That's a great question. We look at the Old Testament sometimes, and people often see this dichotomy between the New Testament God that is forgiving and the Old Testament God that's angry and filled with wrath. The truth is they're the same, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But why is anger, why is wrath sinful if God himself has it? And we even read about it even in the New Testament. Romans 1:18 says this, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness." That's a message for our culture sometimes, right? Colossians 3:6 says this, "For it is because these things that the wrath of God will come upon the sons of disobedience." Old Testament now, Jeremiah 10:10 says, "But the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and everlasting King. At his wrath the earth quakes, and the nations cannot endure his indignation." So it's abundantly clear that in the scripture that God gets angry. He gets very angry. Talks about the earth shaking. Talks about in Scripture that his wrath burns against people. We look in the time of Noah when God was so angry at what was going on earth that he actually wiped out a whole huge portion of it. Flooded the whole thing. So it comes to the question is if we're supposed to be like God, why is it fair that God can be wrathful and God can be upset but we can't? Isn't that unfair? And I say absolutely not. It's not unfair at all. And anyone that thinks that is going to fall into something we're going to talk about next week. It's the idea that we are not on the same level as God. We are not the same. We are created in his image. We do our best to reflect his goodness, but we are not God. We cannot function on his level. So we can't say, well, it's fair that God does it. Why can't I? In the same vein that I've got my daughter. She's going to be 5 next month. She can't drive a car, and I can. Is that fair? Yes. She shouldn't drive a car. It is way bigger than her. It is way more powerful than her. She would cause immense damage if she tried to get up behind the wheel of a motor vehicle. And that's not even a great comparison because the truth is, I can't fix a car. I'm not a perfect driver. I can make mistakes. I know nothing about vehicles other than the direction that they go and sometimes where the gas is supposed to go. But still, there's that difference there. And the difference between us and God is monumental. So for us to look and say, well, God can be angry, God can be wrathful, so can I. That's like me looking at the president being like, well, he can decide when people don't have to go to work. He can make holidays, so can I. That's like me. That's like a little kid being like, well, my mom and dad can drive, so can I. No, that's not how it works. We're not the same. Because here's the thing. I can still lose control. Like my daughter can lose control of a car. She can mess up. She can do damage. We can lose control of our anger. We can go too far and we can cause damage. God can't. And when I say God can't, I mean God literally cannot do that. It's against his very nature because we know that God is perfect and all loving, but he's perfect and all just. So God's justice is balanced out by his love. So the wrath that God can send can never exceed his love. It's actually impossible. It's against his very nature to do that. Right? This is why we get confused when we look at the Old Testament. Like, well, this is a wrathful God. Yeah, if you're looking at it that way, but it's the same God that died for his people. In the same way that if I ground my daughter and say, hey, you got to go to your room for a little bit because you were trying to pull your baby brother's arms off, you got to sit. She might think in that moment, well, my dad's mean, but she hasn't seen the rest of it, that everything I've done in my life is for her. She's just seeing this glimpse, right? So we look at the anger and the wrath of God, but that was never meant to be separated from the salvation and the grace of God that comes later. It's one and the same. It's one act. It's all together. Yeah, we break it up for human terms, but that's the plan of salvation. So God can't get too angry. He can't fly off the handle. His anger is always perfectly justified. And our anger can be righteous as long as it is justified, but it has the ability to move into sin as soon as, like Thomas Aquinas says, it goes away from reason, goes away from godly anger, and goes into that worldly view where we are trying to get things done for ourselves and we are taking things into our own hands. Deuteronomy 32:35 says this, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay in due time. Their foot will slip, their day of disaster is near, and their doom rushes upon them." Essentially what that's saying is acting out in vengeance, acting out in anger, acting out in rage is actually taking the place that God is supposed to do. That's saying that I want to do God's job for him. You guys ever seen Bruce Almighty? It's if you haven't seen it, it's pretty goofy, but Jim Carrey gets the powers of God for like a little bit. And most of the movie's it's all very silly. It was kind of fun. But there's something right at the beginning that they kind of realize that as soon as he gets God's power, there's all this stuff going on and he can't handle it and he can't comprehend what's going on. The truth is, even if we had the ability, we would not want God's job. We don't want God's job. So we shouldn't try to do it for him. Right? Any handymen in the house? Any handy guys here? I'm not very handy. If I have someone coming over to fix my house or something, I will say, you tell me what to do and I will help. Or if it's a professional, I'm not going to stand there and be like, you're using the wrong screwdriver for that, buddy. He's going to look at me like I'm an idiot because I am an idiot in that situation. Right? On the same way, and I don't want his job. I don't want to fix things. I don't know how to fix things. But on that same level, when we try to take vengeance, when we try to mete out our own anger, we're literally telling Job, like, you're actually using the wrong tool for that. What you should use is me and my angry Twitter fingers, because I'm going to cancel them. Me and my boldly worded email. Me and my rage. Me and my disdain. Me and my grudge. That's the right way to do it, God. Your way is wrong. And that leads into pride, but that's all next week's, and that's going to be a good one. You're going to want to be here for that one. See, it's God's job to do that. And because, like I said before, in God's nature, he is all loving. He cannot go too far in his anger. So why can't we just do that? Why can't we go to the appropriate level of anger? Well, we kind of can. Right? Like sometimes we can be and wrath isn't just being angry. Like justified, righteous anger is a good thing. If someone hurts your mom, if someone is mean, if someone is rude to you, if someone damages my kids, if something happens to me, if I see things in our culture that are destructive, it is okay to be righteously angry at them. And it is actually okay to have that righteous anger motivate you towards action, but that action can never be vengeance. That action can never be to cause more damage. That action can never be to draw the sword. Right? It's understanding where that goes that keeps it from being wrathful. Godly anger will motivate godly action. But wrath and the sin of that will motivate more sin and more destruction. And the scripture is very clear on this, right? Romans 12, 17, 19 says this, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. God knows that anger is inevitable. He understands that. It's written through his word. It's not saying never be angry because he doesn't want us to be fake people. But there's so much scripture about letting go of anger and not dwelling it any further. It's all over the place. It's not our job to dwell on it. It damages us. Right? Proverbs 29:11 says this, fools give vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end. James 1 verse 20 says, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Ephesians 4:31 says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander along with every form of malice. We should be actively purging ourselves of these things. We should be looking to forgive. We should not be holding on to that, but it's difficult because it's very countercultural once again. And we're learning that as we're going through all of these sins. They're against, like in culture, they're celebrated, but we should be staying away from them. They're often the opposite of a virtue, right? The opposite virtue of wrath would be mercy. But mercy is not something that's celebrated in our culture. People want to get what they deserved. You want to see karma, hit them. You want to see what happens, right? I'm going to use an example. Like, let's look at like action movie franchises, like movies that I do quite enjoy. Me also, John Wick movies. Anyone see John Wick? Yeah. I'm thinking I'm back. Like, I watched John Wick 4. He only says like 3 lines, and it's all, yeah. It's great. And here's the thing, you watch it and we empathize, it's awesome, and those guys are bad, they killed his dog. Yeah, they did kill his dog. Again, spoiler, whatever, the movie's been out for a while. As a result of John Wick's dog being killed, in John Wick 1, John Wick kills 77 people on screen. In John Wick 2, he kills 128 more people. In John Wick 3, he chills a bit, he only kills 94. But in John Wick 4, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back, and he kills 140 people. That's insane. And we watch that, but we're invested and we're cheering for it, and we think it's awesome, and we put ourselves in the seat of that person, and it's like, yeah, oh man, if someone wants to get me, I'm going to show them what's up. And maybe it doesn't extend to murdering people over a dog, but maybe it's a conversation in the shower where you build up all your anger and you just destroy that person's argument 1,000 times over, and you get out of that shower with a clean body but a dirty soul because you're so mad. Maybe it's getting into a room of people and you're looking for confirmation bias of the things that make you angry. So instead of surrounding yourself with people that will calm you down and bring peace to a situation, you find people that are just as mad as you, and you just get each other going to the point where you're so mad and you're carrying out so much secondary offense that you don't even know what the truth is anymore. You're just mad and someone needs to pay. It happens all the time. So am I saying as Christians, we shouldn't enjoy these revenge movies about killing people? Honestly, maybe. Right? Like, I've been pretty vocal. I'm like, hey, you probably shouldn't listen to true crime and listen to how people are like murdering people. It's probably not good for your soul. It's probably equally not good for your soul to watch people murder each other on TV all the time. I'm guilty of it too. But at the same time, if we are trying to stay away from these things that we think are deadly, why do we celebrate them? Maybe we need to recognize that feeding into the worldly areas of anger and revenge are actually damaging to who we are. It can actually impact the way that we interact with people. So why then is wrath so deadly? We know what it is. We know where it's there. Why is it so deadly? So firstly, and this is a very simple and easy one, it's that incredible Hulk moment, right? Punches it. Outward bursts of anger can be physically damaging to ourselves and people around us. Like, that should go without saying, but at the same time, sometimes things need to be said. Psalm 37:8 says this, refrain from anger and turn away from wrath. Do not fret, it leads only to evil. Matthew 26:52 says this, put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. And what we're looking at there is anger begets anger. Rage induces more rage. If you want to fight with someone and they're ready to fight with you, then the fight will take place. Violence leads to violence. And even as cool as watching a movie like John Wick might be, we all know in real life, it's like there's no way that would work, because that's just more people being killed, and there's going to be people being killed on the other side, and it's go back and forth, back and forth. It's unbelievably damaging. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical violence, right? It can be any sort of thing. It can be emotional trauma. It can be damage. It can be abuse. It can be all these things. It can just be a grudge that you're holding on to. But the truth is, if you want to diffuse, have you ever been ready to fight with someone? And you're so mad at them, and you go, and I'm going to say, I don't know, let's say Megan cuts me off in traffic. Or she does something worse. I don't know, I'm really mad at Megan. And I'm I had my shower conversation, I'm ready to go. Megan's about to get destroyed. I'm going to put it on YouTube and everything. It's going to be great. And the first thing she says is, oh, Pastor Ben, I'm so glad at your end. I'm so sorry about that. Thank you for being gracious and taking time to meet with me. I've had a hard time sleeping. I'm really sorry. Will you please forgive me? In that moment, I'm just like, I guess. It diffuses the situation. But if she comes at me with anger, it's going to go back and forth and back and forth. Eventually she'll win because Megan's a stone cold killer. But I'm kidding. I don't know, maybe. No one's ever lived to tell the tale. No, I'm joking. But the truth is, even if we find ourselves fully justified in our actions, anger is not the godly way to go about it. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later. But the truth is, I say the truth is a lie. I guess I'm talking a lot of truth today. But the more that we let go of anger, the more that we decide to step away from violence, decide to step away from aggression, the more we're actually being Christ-like, and the more we're being an example to the world around us. Right? There's that adage of smooth seas make for weak sailors, right? So if the world that we're living in is this sea, and Christians are supposed to be known by our love, it's really difficult to be known by your love if everyone's nice to you all the time. You want to stand out, be known by your love when you have the right to be angry. That's when it will stand out. Secondly, anger damages the person holding on to it. And this is a big one. Man, I've seen people's entire lives destroyed because they can't get over a grudge from 10, 15 years back. And everything they do now is colored by that, to the point where they don't even know what the original thing is, but they've shaped their entire worldview around one offense. And as a result of that, it poisons and it seeps into everything that they do. Nelson Mandela was credited with this, but I'm sure others have said it as well. Resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it will kill your enemies. Right? Because on a practical side, the truth is sometimes you hold a grudge and you think that person hurt you so bad, but the truth is they were just having a bad day and they don't even know what they did. Right, I'm going to go back to the book of Avengers again. And in Endgame, there's this moment where, like, Wanda the Scarlet Witch, she goes towards Thanos, the big bad, and she's like, you took everything from me. And he's like, I don't even know who you are. Like, it was a Tuesday for me. But sometimes we actually allow people to take so much more from us because, yeah, maybe someone cuts you off in traffic or maybe someone makes a comment or a joke that you took really personally and they don't even know it. Was it right for them to do it? Not necessarily. They could have been in the wrong, but at the same time, you can make it this huge thing and why does that person hate me? And you tell the story to yourself over and over again, but what you should be doing is just dropping the story. Being at peace. The energy that we can put into being angry at people is all-consuming. Like, there's a stand-up comedian that does a bit. He's like, it's really hard to dance if you've lost your wallet. Right? Like if I'm at a wedding and I'm like, I want to dance, but like I can't find my wallet, but like I like the song. I can't put all the energy in because I'm really stressed about my wallet. But the truth is, it's really hard to experience joy when you're carrying the bitterness and the anger at someone. And sometimes you don't even want yourself to be happy because like, no, I should be mad at this person right now. And we can get to ourselves to a point where all we do is talk about how mad we are, think about how wrong the other person is. And eventually that initial bit of anger has grown into something that has consumed our entire lives and has taken the place of the joy that should be on the lives of someone that is a follower of Jesus. Like, this gets me a lot. I get really frustrated when the poster boys, when the advertisement for what Christians are very angry. And it's not always like the angry Southern Baptists you talk about. As a youth pastor for a long time, like, obviously we had to listen to a lot of NF as, like, he's a rapper, right? You guys know who NF is? And, like, people, do you like NF? I'm like, not really. I'm so, like, no offense to Alec. I'm sure he's very talented, but he sounds mad all the time. And if I'm listening to that, I'm like, I don't necessarily, and I know he's rapping about things that are real, and I'm sure he's a much happier person in real life, but if all that I project is anger and rage, I'm not being a good example of what the joy of the Lord is. Let me listen to something happy. Like, throw some Chance the Rapper on. He's happy all the time. I like him. Not all of his songs. But the truth is, we should be living like joy. Joy is a fruit of the Spirit. And anger and rage and grudges hold us against that because the energy that we should be experiencing joy with, we're actually building up and we're getting it so tightly wound. And we just need to let it go. And finally, the most deadly spot where anger comes and destroys is anger. Dwelling on anger is the exact opposite of Christ-likeness. And this is where it really lies. At the end of the day, holding on to anger and resentment is the exact opposite of what Christ did and what Christ called us to do. Matthew 5:38-40 says this. You have heard that it was said, and this is very famous scripture, an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn then the other cheek also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand him your coat as well. This is a crazy one because in this situation, this is talking about someone that is being attacked, someone that's being assaulted, someone that is in the right, and Jesus is saying you still need to forgive. And obviously Jesus is talking about himself doing this later on because he was going to be killed. He was led astray. He was murdered and tortured by people that he did nothing to. He was completely justified, and at any moment he could have exacted his wrath and vengeance, but his words were, forgive them, Father, they do not know what they do. So when we find ourselves in a situation where we're holding on to that rage, like, well, Pastor Ben, you don't know what happened to me. You're right, I don't. But I don't think it was worse than what happened to Jesus. And I'm not trying to minimize anyone's hurt, because that I would never want to do that. What I'm trying to do is magnify the difference between what we can go through as humans and what Christ went through for us. And the more that we go through, the more opportunities we actually have to be like Jesus. Man, the most Christ-like people I know have been through the worst things in the world, and they have forgiven people for it. The most incredible stories are always around forgiveness, right? There's that story, right? Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Or not story, that saying. That is completely false if you hold on to what doesn't kill you. Right? What doesn't kill you can leave you broken, can leave you with a grudge, can leave you with a bad back, can leave you in a situation where you're holding on to something. But if you let it go and forgive, then that makes you stronger. Because it makes you more like Jesus. And Jesus was that perfect example of forgiveness, right? Like, think about it. Jesus lived a perfect life and gave his life for those who hated him, and he forgave them. Which gets us to a tricky spot sometimes. It points us to a conclusion that as soon as we find ourselves in a spot where we cannot forgive and that we must punish those that have wronged us, we are putting ourselves into a spot above God. Think about that for a second. As soon as we find someone, well, I can't forgive, it's saying, well, no, my hurt, my injustice, the wrong that has been done to me is greater than that, so I'm putting myself in a spot above God where I'm saying, yeah, it's okay if you offend him, but you better not offend me. Oh, I never want to be in that seat. And that ties into the whole pride thing. We'll talk about that next week. The idea of wrath and acting in anger also leans towards the idea of lack of trust and faith in God. Right? When God says vengeance is mine and we say, actually, I'm going to take care of that. That's saying, God, I don't actually trust you. God, I don't actually believe that you have what is best for me, so I'm going to go take care of it myself. Right? It goes back to that handyman story where there's something broken, something's breaking in my house, and I Google it and I'm like, oh, I can fix this. I can't fix it. But someone tells me, yeah, I'll go take care of it. And I say, I just want to take care of it now. So I get out my drill. I get out my first tool kit because I don't have a lot of tools, or I borrow it from someone, and I just make a huge mess of the house. I slap boards up, and I'm like, there we go. That's good enough for now. And I think that it's great. And then I call the handyman. I say, yeah, you know what? I don't need you to come. I taped it up. It's all good. And then, because I'm a terrible handyman, it falls apart. And there's more damage that was done as a result of me trying to fix it. And now what was just a small hole in the drywall is a massive hole because I've drilled things in and they've fallen apart. And the more times I try to fix it in my own strength, the worse it's going to get. That's what reacting in anger is. It's taking God's job into our own hands. Now, am I saying that every single time we're upset at someone or every single time we hold a grudge, we're consciously saying, hey, God, just so you know, I'm better than you? No. That's not what I'm saying, because I don't think it's a conscious thing. But it's important for us to realize what we're putting in front of us. It's important for us to realize the habits that we find ourselves falling into. Are we being forgiving? Are we being kind? Are we being patient? Right? Galatians 5:22-23 says this, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. See, wrath and anger is so deadly because it literally chokes out every single one of those things. Right? Like if I had to look at what anger was, could we put that last slide up there again? Sorry. But if I had to look at anger was, like anger is the opposite of, it can be the opposite of joy. Or I'm going to say wrath, not saying. It can be opposite of love, opposite of peace, opposite of forbearance, opposite of kindness, goodness, faithfulness. All these things are in direct opposition to that. So why are we surprised that the enemy makes it such an attractive emotion? Right? Because don't get me wrong, anger is an attractive emotion. Sometimes it feels good to be angry. Sometimes it feels good to yell at someone. Sometimes you wish you just would have had one more conversation with them, right? That's where that whole shower conversation comes in, right? You wish that you could have said what you wanted to say so you could damage that person, so you could be right, so you could be stronger, because we get that release of that anger being pushed out. But that is not proper. It's actually a sinful desire to give them what's coming to them. Oh, but we pray every day that we don't get what's coming to us. And we're thankful that God actually stepped in and took what was coming from us. Right? We talked about the story when we were talking about greed of the parable where Jesus is talking about how someone was forgiven a massive debt of a lifetime's worth of money. And on his way home, he choked someone out that owed him a couple bucks. That's the spot we find ourselves in when we're not being forgiving. And on a practical level, because we talked about, and this all makes sense from biblical and spiritual level, but on a practical level, there's so many things that you can put your energy into. God has created us wonderful, creative minds with incredible gifts, right? Like every hair on a head is numbered. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. The amount of energy that is robbed The amount of good that is taken away from the world because people decide to put that God-given energy, that life, that breath that he gave us into anger, into malice, into dwelling on things that don't matter, into dwelling on situations that will never come to fruition. But it feels good to think about, but it makes us exhausted. When the truth is, you don't have to carry it, right? You don't have to cut that grass. You don't have to carry that weight, and unforgiveness can be a weight. I'm gonna tell you a story and I'll close with this. So I've had it's crazy because you can get most angry at the people that are the closest to you, right? And the people that you're you can be hurt by people, and I've had situations where I've been hurt by people. And you walk away. I found myself in a situation where someone that at one point was my best friend ended up hurting me more than anyone in my life has. And both of us were unbelievably angry at each other. And we go our separate ways. We don't talk to each other. We don't see each other. Every single Facebook post that they see of me, they're reading it in a view of something. Every single Facebook post that I see of them, I'm reading into it. And we're talking about each other to everyone all the time. And we're so mad. And we don't interact. And then you accidentally run into someone somewhere. And it's like, oh, they're not that bad. And even if the relationship isn't restored, I can tell you when I had to interact with that person again, I think it was at a wedding, I walked away feeling awesome. Not because I was like, oh, I'm the better person. No, I walked away being like, I don't have to be mad at that person. I can disagree with them. I can still think what they're doing is silly sometimes. But I don't have to hold on to that rage and resentment because it's not my job. And here's another thing. This is just life advice. The person that you're really angry at probably isn't the devil you've made them out to be. Because you know you're not the devil someone's made you out to be. So rather than building up animosity on this idealized straw man of arguments and people and things in our hearts, talk to people. Live in grace and forgiveness. Extend the grace and forgiveness that you wish was extended to you, or better yet, extend the grace and forgiveness that has been extended to you, and see every opportunity of anger and wrath to be actually an example of unbelievable Christ-like love.